Hello, welcome to my channel. This here is a Seiko Willard, a 6105-8110, nicknamed the Captain Willard, of course, from the Apocalypse Now film. The main character, Willard, was wearing this watch on his wrist. This is my first ever full watch restoration. I've done previous things where I've sort of changed dials and hands and cases and stuff like that, but this is the first time I'm ever diving right into the depths of this watch and pulling it all apart and servicing it. And oh boy, oh man, this was a real delight. If any of you have watched like Wristwatch Revival and Weekend Watch Repair and My Retro Watches, you know, those sorts of channels, you see them doing this stuff, and it just looks amazing. And I've always wanted to do this. I've been talking about it to my friends for years, saying I've wanted to start, and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to buy a junk old watch. This watch was about £400, and I got it from Seiko, which is a Japanese proxy service for like all of the auction sites and stuff. So I got this from Japan, and it was perfect. It's in pretty beat up condition. It's not the most desirable because of the damage to the loom. You can see there it's got what's called loom rot, which is where it goes black. So the hands are quite damaged, and the loom has actually like splatted onto the upside of the underside of the crystal. Thankfully, didn't land on the dial. Well, actually, a tiny bit did, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I thought this is going to be an absolutely perfect opportunity for me to give this a good old go. Even the bezel doesn't move, and that turns out to by far be the biggest issue on this entire thing, which I was not expecting. And yeah, there's some tough watch moments in this. So if you're squeamish, not that there's going to be any blood, but if you are squeamish to watching painful things with watches, maybe don't watch this video, because this really is an amateur attempting to service a watch. So here it comes off the case back, possibly the first time in several decades, and probably the last person it would hope was going to take off that case back. But yeah, there's no going back now. Well, there actually is. I could just put it right back down and give it to someone who knows what they're doing. This is the movement. This is the joyous part that we will be completely stripping down with zero experience, if I didn't mention that already. I think this is going to be like a really accurate representation of what it's going to be like for someone who has no idea what they're doing to service a watch. So you can see that there's loads of things that are loose. That screw there for the bridge plate is moving. The barrel is loose. I was trying to test to see if there was any end shake on the barrel, and by manipulating it, I actually managed to get the balance wheel to start springing. But ultimately, I think everything's kind of loose. You can see the balance wheel is spinning there, which is obviously a good sign. But if you saw at the start, the seconds hand would sort of tick and then stop. So there's quite a few issues that this watch turns out to have. You can see all of the gunk in there as well. It's absolutely horrendous. So the first thing we're going to do is put it on the timographer. And as you can see, it's an absolute mess. What a good watch would look like is just one straight line. And this one is basically as bad as it gets. Yeah, I mean, you can see there, minus 140 seconds a day, 149 amplitude. It's terrible. So let us begin by taking the movement out of the case. Now, I have done this sort of stuff. This is quite a familiar process for me, but this is the first time I'm doing it with the intention of servicing everything afterwards. So I'm quite comfortable doing these sorts of things, thankfully. So this is the crown and stem coming out. And then I place the cushion underneath and flip it all around. And then I can lift off the case. And there it is. Now, for me, that dial is absolutely beautiful. You can see down at 7 o'clock, the bottom left-hand corner of that indice at 7 o'clock is a little splat of the loom. So that is the one bit that landed on the dial, but I am not upset about that. You know, this is a very old watch. It's from 1975, this particular one. So let's put the crown and stem back in, and we're going to remove the hands now. So I'm going to set it down into this little movement holder, and then I'm going to align the hands. Now it has a hacking, so you can see the second hand has stopped there. And then when I press it in, give it a little bit of a shake, it will swing round, and then I can pull that crown out again, and there we go. So I'm going to place a bag down over the dial, a very thin sort of plastic bag, so that I can take these off and not damage the dial. And there we go. Now there was actually quite a lot of rust on the cannon pinion, which is the post that the hour hand and the minute hand kind of sit on. I think it's actually just one of them, but both of them, both the wheels and the pinion that hold the hands were rusty. You can see it's really brown in the center there. So that's the hands removed. Now, we're going to talk about what I'm going to do with those later, but for now I'm just going to set them aside in this. And this is me just sort of picking at little bits that were on the dial with some Rodico. You can see I'm going to prod that little splat there and see if I can pick any of it up and thin it down a bit. I did manage to. I didn't want to go too crazy with it because basically these sorts of dials, these dials in general are really fragile, but obviously these older ones, it's just not worth it. I'm never going to be able to find a replacement of those. Plus, I don't want to spend too much money on new parts because then that makes this ultimately quite cheap watch become quite expensive. So everything gets set in here, and then I put this in a locked vault several miles from my house. No, I literally just put it on the shelf behind me so that I could keep it well away. So let's now remove the bezel. So this is my bezel removal tool, and usually you just pop this over and give it a squeeze, and it's a very hard plastic that sort of works its way underneath the bezel and between the case and then pops it all off. Failing that, because it didn't work, I'll try and use a case knife, but I don't really like using these because I'm not experienced enough to sort of know what I'm doing. So I placed that in there, in the gap, and tried to get it off, and I was having no luck. So I tried again with this, and no luck. Now, in this process, I was chatting to my friend Dave, who's a professional watchmaker, and he suggested leaving it in the ultrasonic cleaner to loosen up some of the crud. Now, admittedly, I probably didn't leave it in for long enough, but I left it in there for probably about 10 minutes. So after the watch had come out of the ultrasonic cleaner, I gave it a good old pat down with some kitchen roll just to make sure there wasn't any moisture sitting around. And then I returned to the trusty old bezel removal tool. Now, bear in mind, I've used that several times before with no issues. So I bought this tool following some advice from my friend Dave. And realistically, I'm just not skilled enough or competent enough. I don't know, but this is where it all went wrong, and this really was catastrophic, and it was annoying as well because Mike from My Retro Watches said these things are risky. You know, they are risky because if you don't get it perfectly in the gap between the bezel and the case, you'll do exactly what I did. And by the way, the whole time I was absolutely petrified of like cutting my finger off. And arguably something worse happened. I gouged into the case. This was about as devastating of a result that I could have gotten, other than also cutting my finger off. But yeah, this turned out to be an absolute nightmare. And I was just so sad because, you know, this watch has lived for this long and it's survived so much. These watches went through Vietnam. They were service use. They were on an explorer who climbed Arctic mountains. And here I am, some goofball trying to learn a new skill, and I just gouged right into the case. So I sent it to my friend Dave. He managed to get off the bezel. He put it in the ultrasonic bath for about half an hour and then was able to pop it off. And you can see all of the gunk and crud and grime that was effectively cementing this bezel down into place. And with everything taken apart, he was able to then weld up the marks that I had created and then, reshape the case. And the other thing he did was he sort of reinstated the brush finish onto the top. Now, he didn't polish the case. He didn't polish anywhere else. I didn't want him to remove anything from it, but he just welded up those spots. And obviously to sort of get that weld then flat, he had to, refinish that top part of the case. So we made the decision to brush finish the top so that it has that iconic sort of brush finish to the top of it, but we didn't change anything else. And we also didn't polish up the top to remove any of the marks. So it actually really authentically looks as it should be for something this age. And plus, with the wear that I'm going to be giving this thing, it's only going to get more scratches again soon. So I'm really, really pleased with what Dave has done. And I'm just so unbelievably grateful that I have people in my life like that who are so willing and able to help me, resolve an issue. So, massive thank you to Dave. So we'll talk about the case again later on. Let's now get on with the disassembly of the movement. So this big plate can come off. You can see, I'm having a hard time unscrewing. I'm having a hard time picking up the screws. I'm not wearing a finger cot, which was a reoccurring theme, which for later on, which I do something really stupid. What a surprise. So I take all of the screws out here and then we can get underneath. And yeah, I was just a little bit rusty. By the end, I definitely had improved in the screwing and unscrewing. But I was just nervous to pick things up and nervous to apply too much pressure. So this is the calendar wheel coming off. And again, that gets popped into the same container as the dial to keep that all safe. Now, this is the sort of date jumper spring, which just applies some pressure to it. And so that can come off using a bit of Rodico to stop it from pinging off. And then we can just start tearing this thing apart. This is a really interesting wheel. It's got a spring and a little sort of lever, and that is what advances the date on the calendar wheel. But it only does it when you rotate the crown one way. So that spring sort of gives way if you do it in the opposite direction, and that's just to protect everything from spinning in a direction it's not supposed to. So the cannon pinion comes off, and you can see just how rusty that is. We're going to have to give that a thorough clean, and then I'm just going to place all of the parts into these little parts containers just to keep everything nice and organized. Now, as a novice, as a newbie, what I did was I basically just placed the parts with the corresponding screw. It wasn't so important if there was a load of parts that didn't have a screw. I just put them in the same sort of area. But if a part had a screw, I kept it with the part. So this is the balance wheel assembly coming off. That's my first time doing that. Kind of terrifying. Managed to get it off. Quite pleased. And then we can take off the automatic bridge, which is what I believe that's called. So there's 3 screws holding that down. These screws on this sort of back side are all polished as well, because it's the movement facing side that you would see if you took off the case back. And I find that to just be such a nice attention to detail. Really, really struggling with removing these screws. I didn't drink coffee 2 days in the lead up to this, by the way. Reading some comments. That just pinged off. That was supposed to hold that down. But yeah, the advice was not to drink any caffeine. So I listened to that, and it definitely helped, but unfortunately my nerves got the better of me. That wasn't supposed to happen. This is me removing the power from the mainspring in the barrel, and you're supposed to sort of move that click out the way and putting pressure on the screw, unwind it slowly. But I wasn't putting enough pressure on, and it just jumped there and turned a few times, which is bad, but also I am replacing the mainspring anyway, so it's not the end of the world. That screwdriver was magnetized as well, so yeah, not great. I need to get some sort of a demagnetizer. So this is me just looking at the end shake, but this was a rather pointless exercise because that whole bridge plate is still loose. So this didn't really prove much, but ultimately what people do on these watches at this point is they do like a jewel upgrade to the barrel so that they, you know, you're replacing the worn out metal with a nice jewel, which you can then lubricate really well. I don't have the skills for that, obviously, so I'm not going to be doing that. But potentially I'll learn. Well, I will learn, I'm sure, and then I can revisit it and do that. So this is the bridge plate for the pallet fork. Removing these screws now. I should not have done that. Did you see I left one screw and then I went to the other? That was just like impatience. I shouldn't have done that, because if one sort of slip would just ping that over to the other side of the room on the floor, we're doomed. So that's the pallet fork coming out, and you can see here I'm organizing everything into the little tray there. And look at how loose that screw was. I don't even know how that's happened. Kind of crazy, really, when you think about it. It's just loose in there. I dread to think the damage that might have caused to stuff. You know, the uneven wear and whatnot. Because this is what basically holds all of the kind of main gear train down, so you know it's really not good having that loose. You can see I slipped with the screwdriver a couple of times. That is not something you'd see on wristwatch revival or my retro watches. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm using the right screwdriver here, but the other one that was the right one was magnetized, so I just grabbed this out of my drawer. But it's a vintage one that probably needs to be you know, sort of dressed, I think it's called. So that's the big bridge plate coming off, and yeah, this thing was really, really grotty. There was lots of just gunk everywhere. So this is the fourth wheel coming out, and the third wheel. I don't know how they came up with those names. This is the hack. This is the hack movement. There's two. That's the escape wheel coming out. But yeah, there's two versions of this movement, one that has a hack and one that doesn't. Mine does, which is good because it means you can get it accurate to the second. So that was what that big brass wishbone looking thing was. So let's go ahead and take out the crown and stem and the little clutch wheel, I believe that's called, and place that all into the tray. Out comes the barrel, and you can see that gunk under there. That's going to be a combination of the worn out metal and the oil. So then there's a few little parts which I will get the name for in the reassembly, but I don't know the name of them right now. This is all just to do with the keyless works, basically, all these sort of components here. So again, just going to go ahead and remove all of these final components. Now, at this point, I was feeling really good. You know, I'd taken apart most of the movement. Nothing really had gone wrong. Well, okay, that's not true. A very massive thing went wrong. But in terms of the actual movement, nothing had really gone wrong. And I was feeling really, really proud of myself and really pleased and optimistic. This was around the time where I then put a post up on my YouTube channel just being like, guys, I've taken apart my first watch. And there were lots of comments of people saying, well, the reassembly is obviously much harder, which is true. But at this point, I just felt like I'd sort of, you know, achieved something anyway. You know, just the fact of seeing something online that I really wanted to do for years and then doing it, starting it. That for me meant that the hardest part was kind of out of the way, because it was the putting off of giving it a go in fear of failing. And so at this point, I'm, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound, and I'm just gonna make it work. You know, even if I need to get some help or whatever it is, I'm giving it a go. This is my first one, and we're in for the journey together. So this is quite a scary part, and I've seen loads of people doing this online, but this again was my first time trying this. So this is me removing the mainspring from the barrel. Now it's something that you see people doing, and there's this kind of finessing way that they do it. And let me tell you, it was not pretty. I didn't make any mistake though. It came out perfectly, but it was not as sort of well finessed as the big channels do it. That is inside the barrel. Absolutely dreadful. The damage that is caused by not having lubrication is just insane. You can see on these wheels here as well, all of the gunk and grime in between all of the teeth in the center there. There's some more shots. That's the top of where the barrel goes for the mainspring. This is the fourth wheel there. And there is some more wear again. It's just crazy to see how dirty these old parts are. And it's going to be extremely satisfying to give them all a clean, which is what is coming up now. So remember, I'm new to this, so I do not have all of the gadgets. And one of the things that I'm missing is the professional watch cleaner. I am the unprofessional watch cleaner, and this is how I did it. So I started off in a bath with some watch cleaning solution. Now, I was wearing a mask for this because this stuff smells really, really bad. And it took me about 4 hours to clean this. So, I mean, I left all the windows open and I had my mask on for nearly all of it. And I still had a headache by the end of the day. I'm going to get a watch cleaner yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to get a watch cleaner because I want to do this again, but I'm just not willing to do it in this way because it's just absolutely ridiculous. So this is a piece of pegwood, and I'm just very lightly pressing inside all of the jewels to make sure that all of the gunk and grime is cleaned out. And this is just the sort of first phase of what was probably a 3-step sort of system to clean everything. So yeah, this is the main sort of plate of the movement. So I just gave everything a really thorough clean. Then I returned the balance wheel to the plate and sort of just secured that down. And then I placed that inside the watch cleaning solution as well, just to give everything a thorough clean. But before that, I removed the first of the 2 shock jewels. Now this was, again, my first time, funnily enough, doing this. It's quite a easy thing to look at doing, but to do it in principle is very, very hard. You have to sort of manipulate this little spring round, which that's the sort of shock element, so that there's, so that basically that spring sort of has a bit of movement in it so that the balance wheel can have a shock, like a drop or a knock, and not just snap at the ends or even sort of crack the jewel. So that explanation was terrible, but you get the idea. So that's it, giving it a nice clean. Yeah, basically they must have worked out somewhere in the pocket watch times that dropping a watch and it then completely stopping, or knocking it and then it completely stopping and being broken, was not ideal. So they implemented this shock system, which is really quite straightforward with that little spring, but obviously it just gives those end jewels, gems, crystals, all the great terminology here on this channel. It gives them some play, which obviously makes a huge difference. So I'm now going through and cleaning all of the other components. Everything was sort of held with a set of tweezers and then brushed and pegwooded, and then I just gave it a little shake around. It was really just giving it a go, getting everything as clean as possible, whilst also trying not to press too hard on anything. So, you kind of need to hold things down while giving them a brush, and it's quite difficult to do that and not press down hard. And I didn't want to press down hard on anything. That's the little cannon pinion. Again, really rusty. So with that, I held that down and I actually just sort of used the pegwood to scrape off the rust. Now, most watchmakers do a pre-clean. This is what I'm doing here, a pre-clean. But lots of them just chuck all the stuff into a watch cleaning machine, which obviously does such a thorough job of cleaning all these parts, which is why I'm so attracted by the idea of getting one myself, because the cleaning process of all of these tiny parts is just ridiculous. Now, the other thing as well, which happens with when you watch these videos, is that you think everything's quite big because, like, you know, it's taking up quite a large portion of your screen. But look at the dust underneath the jar on my desk. Like, that's dust particles. We're looking at the tip of a makeup brush, and you could count the bristles. You know, we are zoomed well in. Now, I know I could shorten this cleaning process into a bit of a montage and speed through it with some music or something, but I'm not going to do that, and feel free to just skip a bit more through this video. But there are going to be people like me who genuinely want to do this for the first time, and looking at this sort of part shows that it is possible to be doing this as an amateur and cleaning stuff without a big expensive watchmaking machine. You know, I can sort of justify the purchase a bit more as a content creator, that you know, it's my job to make content, but it's also my passion and my hobby. And so I probably will go out and buy one of those machines. But the average person who might just want to give this a go every few months is probably not going to want to commit all of that money to it. Especially because you can pick up old watches for like £50 that need servicing. And you don't want to have to then go out and spend £1,000 on all of the stuff instantly in order to get into the hobby. You know, you wanna just sort of like work your way up, don't you? And until you either really love it or you realize you don't want to do it, in which case you don't want to have your money tied up in a bunch of stuff. So this is you know, something that people can skip through if they're watching, but I want to leave it in, and also I want to watch back on this video when I am better at doing this, and I trust that I will get better. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I really did enjoy doing this. So I'm fairly certain I'm going to be giving this another go. And also, I just love filming this stuff. I mean, I know the camera work isn't like absolutely perfect, and I've only currently got one camera that's really zoomed in, so there are a couple of things that I miss, but I do really love filming these videos. You know, look at how clean that barrel is now compared to when I started. It is a thoroughly enjoyable process. So I've got 4 jars here. 2 of them are filled with watch cleaning solution, and then 2 of them are filled with watch rinsing solution. And basically, after that big pre-clean that was in the watch cleaning solution, I'm now going to be putting them into another jar of watch cleaning solution and then putting it in the ultrasonic cleaner. And then I'm going to work my way through number 3 and 4, which are rinsing solutions, to get these parts thoroughly cleaned and rinsed. I'm not going to do 2 cycles of cleaning. I just have 2 jars so that I can sort of put 2 on the go at once, which I actually ended up not doing. It kind of didn't work out really to work. You know, what ended up happening was one jar was sitting while I was waiting for another bit of space in my small ultrasonic cleaner. But yeah, I just put it through a series of sort of cleaning jars and rinsing jars. I bought these little baskets, which were really helpful, because if you remember, I said earlier that I kept the screws with the bridge plates so that I can put them back together with the right screws. Yeah, again, I'm going to leave in just a little bit more of this process just so that you can all see how it's kind of going. And I'm sure there are professionals watching that are wincing right now at what they're looking at, but hopefully I can be forgiven for any mistakes that I make. Maybe not the whole case thing. That was a disaster. I should have definitely listened to Mike and just sent it to him. I mean, the painful thing is he literally offered. He said, Elliot, send it to me. I'll open it for you and send it back. And my own impatience and ego caused the mess that was caused. So this is me taking out the case back gasket, which has gone completely rock hard. It's done its job. Hats off to this case back gasket. Let's all say thank you. And also the bezel gasket as well. This is a diver's watch, so there's quite a few little gaskets in this thing. So I'm going to give the case a clean up with some pegwood. The case did sustain some rust, which is, it is actually quite uncommon for a case to get rusty, but it is possible. And you do get like pitting and stuff where moisture has sat for just such a long time that it started to like eat away at the metal. So there is some stuff on the case that we just have to kind of accept is the way that it is, and just carry on. I mean, I'm not actually going to be diving with this watch or even showering with it, even though it probably would be fine. I'm not going to risk it. Because it is an old watch. I was even drying the screws, which, as you can see, turned out to be an absolutely stupid thing to do. They were going to obviously dry. Plus, I didn't rebuild this thing for a day or two anyway, so they were obviously going to be dry. I was just getting confident and cocky, and it pinged onto the floor, and I had to then hunt around on my rug, wafting a magnet around, and then eventually I heard a tiny little click, and I looked, and the screw was on the end of the magnet. It was like a gift from the watch heavens, to be honest with you. I could not believe it. I thought for sure that was gone. That is pretty much it now with the cleaning. You can see I've even resorted to speeding up this footage, which I'm usually against, but they're still important for showing the passing of time and the work and effort that's gone into it. I don't have a fancy drying machine either. I'm just using this little hand blower to dry the parts, and it works a real treat. You just sort of spray the moisture off, and you keep going until it evaporates and it's bone dry. That does work very nicely. This is the case going into the ultrasonic cleaner, getting a good old clean, and then this is the other remaining parts of the case. Now, this little tray is all of the things that are extremely fragile and delicate that we need to clean by hand and not just chuck into a machine. So this is a small little jar of isopropyl alcohol. You need to be extremely careful not to leave the palette fork in the isopropyl alcohol for too long, because it apparently can melt the sort of glue that binds the jewels to the palette fork. So I dunked it in there for a very small period of time, and then I brushed it, gave it a little blow, and I got it nice and clean, and it was in the IPA for probably less than 10 seconds, and I brushed it with the brush that also had some isopropyl alcohol on it, again, for a very short space of time. Now, these shock jewels come apart in two halves, and you need to give both of those a clean, because the lubrication that we're going to be putting on here, the oil, is going to be sort of sitting in between these two parts. It's such an ingenious solution to friction in the watch movement to use these little jewels, and they came up with it so long ago, hundreds of years ago. It's just incredible. And don't fix what ain't broke. Well, actually, they did fix what was broken by using these shock jewels, but this is me giving everything a clean. I don't think you need to really clean those. I also put them in some isopropyl alcohol in the ultrasonic cleaner, not the palette fork, but just the shock jewels, if that's actually what they're called. I'm not sure, but yeah, they just got a good old little shake in there just to get them all nice and clean. Now we are going to start the first stage of the reassembly. This is some small little oils that I bought off of eBay. Going back to what I was saying about committing to this too much before you know whether you're enjoying it or not. People sell just small little vats of the lubrications that you need so that you don't have to buy loads of it. So this is a little bit of grease going into the barrel, and this is the first time ever using an oiler, and oh boy was this hard. I mean, this was one of the things I knew was going to be difficult. I have not got the most still hands at the best of times, but also my nerves and just excitement as well was really playing into shaking quite a lot. So this is the replacement mainspring. This was quite expensive because it's a Swiss branded one, but it's specific for this watch apparently. I mean, I'm sure it will fit several others, but yeah, it was probably about £50. So I'm going to try and run through the costs of the parts that I used so that we all have an idea of how much I actually paid for this watch by the end of it. So unfortunately I missed this because my head was in the way, but you can see halfway through there, the spring is going through. So I was basically just pushing it into the barrel, starting with the end of the spring. If you get the end of the spring down, it'll go in. Oh my god. So this is some HP 1300 oil, if I remember correctly. So that's going to go in there. And then it's time to put the barrel arbor in. Now this was difficult. Again, it was just something that I did not foresee being hard. But it probably took me 10 minutes to get that to go in. I mean, I'm probably doing it wrong. There are some like notches on it. But you give it a little sort of rotation at the end and it sits how it needs to sit. But yeah, I probably was putting it in wrong, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, once that's gone in, you rotate it around and then it sits how it needs to so that it sort of catches onto that spring. Now it's time to put the top of the barrel on, the little cover plate, and we use this small little tool which sort of pops it down. Now I was hoping for quite a satisfying click. But I didn't get one. Apparently it doesn't always happen. But anyway, that went on. So now we can take out the main plate. I couldn't believe that this was happening because this is the reassembly really beginning here. So I'm going to start by oiling this wheel here, the center wheel. Very small little bit there on the ledge that touches the jewel. I was following a video on this, but it kind of actually does make a lot of sense when you think about it, of why and where you oil stuff. But that's only a skill that experience can sort of give you. Now, there was also some other oils like 9010 and 941. I mean, there was loads of different oils. I'm not in this video going to be going through that because I was following a video from Weekend Watch Repair, which is a far, far better guide to restoring one of these or servicing one of these movements. But also Mike from My Retro Watches, he literally has a library of tutorials on how to service different Seiko movements. So I highly recommend watching someone else if you want to learn how to do this. This is more so me showing you as a complete and utter amateur and novice, me giving this a go for the first time. So this is a bit of grease going onto the hack here. I already put in the escape wheel, and this is the third wheel going down, making sure that everything's kind of engaging. Putting a little bit of oil on the fourth wheel. I actually missed filming that, so that was just a demonstration of kind of where it went. And then that sits down. And then this next part was the next sort of main thing that could go horribly, horribly wrong, which is setting the bridge plate down that covers all of these wheels on the kind of gear train, I think it's called. So there is a method to do this, which is just by tapping the the movement holder, and everything sort of just centers itself. And you can see I just put a tiny little bit of a wind into the mainspring there just to watch and see if all of the wheels were spinning, and knowing that they were then allowed me to tighten that plate down. But you really need to make sure that everything is freely engaging and spinning and set in the right place, because if you start screwing down and a pivot is pushing up against the jewel in the wrong way, the jewel will just crack. So I put the click in, and then this is the ratchet wheel, I think it's called. So I can put the screw in to cover that, and you can see by tightening that down, the wheels are actually spinning. Now this is satisfying. Let's listen to this. So that's exactly what we're looking for. That is exactly what we're looking for. Everything spinning and sort of whirring like that. That is a good sign. So this is the pallet fork going in, which sits right up against the escape wheel. And then there's a bridge plate that covers that as well. Now, again, you need to be careful when tightening that bridge plate down that the pallet fork is sat in it properly. And if you use a good enough loop, like an eye loop, you can actually see the pivots sat in the jewels. But mine wasn't that good. So I was just kind of, wiggling it around until it felt like it was in, which is probably quite a stupid idea. But we can now give it a little wiggle. And with that in, we can actually now put some wind into the barrel, into the mainspring, and then we can watch the pallet fork act how it should be acting, which is that, snapping back and forth. That means it's all in properly. Now the next thing I'm going to do is oil up the shock jewel. Now this was really hard to do because holding this was scary because I didn't want to crack it with the tweezers, but also it's really easy to over oil. So there you go, I over oiled it that time. I did it again off camera and you can see there that little pool in the middle is much better. Probably still not perfect, but it's much better. It's supposed to sort of just be like a little puddle in the middle, not like a, you know, it doesn't need to be filled up to the brim that it's overflowing and not working properly. So just a little bit in the middle, put the cap back on it, and then put it into place and rotate that spring, which again was extremely fiddly and pinged off a couple of times. But yeah, in fact, it fell onto my floor at one point. I did find it in the rug and I took a picture. It wasn't magnetic, so that was just purely luck finding that. Now, I didn't film this bit because my head was in the way, but this is me oiling the pallet fork. Now, that sounds like I know what I'm doing. You have to put the smallest amount of oil on the end of each of the jewels on the pallet fork and then kind of move the pallet fork along so that it spreads out along the escape wheel. That's the theory. I don't know if I actually succeeded. And we'll look at why at the end. But I did try my best, and I didn't get it all over the place. I know that for a fact, but I don't know if there was any oil on the oiler half the time or if I just made a mess of it. So I'm putting the balance wheel back in and putting the jewel on for that as well. And usually at this point, the balance wheel starts spinning. That was not happening on mine. So I got on the phone to Mike.
So just really try and see if you can see that bottom, you know, the pivot actually drop into the jewel hole on the bottom. There, it's just dropped in now.
And basically what we worked out was I broke the first one, and it was possibly already kind of weakened to begin with, because I don't know if you remember, but it wasn't actually spinning very well to begin with. It would spin for a while and then stop. And then the second one that was a replacement I bought on eBay arrived faulty. Like that?
Yeah, a bit more. There we go.
So then it took a third one. We're going to get into it later, but I bought a donor watch and I took the balance wheel out of that. Obviously, buying a balance wheel on its own from eBay is a real issue because it can just get damaged in the post. And I think that's what happened because the spare one I bought came all the way from Japan. So I just replaced that, and that one, well, let's have a look. That spring goes down. Oh, great. I've just lost it in the movement.
Just try and tap.
Got it. It is spinning, see?
Yeah, that's all right then. That's fine. Just take your time. Try and hook one underneath first is what I tend to do with that.
Oh my god. 3 balance wheels later. So the first one I broke myself. The second one was definitely just defective, wasn't it?
Yeah, clearly.
And then this one is having a good old time.
All good.
Mike, you legend. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So this is me now oiling the jewels from the other side. And once I've done that, I can put it on the timographer and we can have a look at how it's doing. Not great, but a very low rate on the on how many seconds it's losing per day or gaining, and a pretty decent amplitude. So let's now go ahead and assemble the dial side, starting with the cannon pinion. And there's some more various lubrications going on here. Mostly on this side it's the grease, because this is a sort of a high friction area. So that's the clutch wheel there going in. That needs to sit on the hacking lever so it kind of engages with it. And then there's some lubrication on that, and also where the setting lever goes, which is that thing right there, which is what we press down to pull in and out the crown. And then there's some lubrication here for the yoke, which is going to sit on the clutch wheel, which obviously then causes it to pull that in and out. And then there's some lubrication there, which is where the yoke spring is going to be pushing up against. This is the quick set. This is to do with changing the time and the date. I put some lubrication in between the wheels on that, which I didn't film because my head got in the way. And then there's some more lubrication going on. And this is the minute wheel cover plate, which is a cover plate for the minute wheel. Just needed to clarify that. And then this is another plate, which is for the quick set, just to stop it from moving. So it kind of just remains sliding underneath that. There's the yoke spring going in. Be very careful with when you place that in. Eerily, once I set that down, it just lifted up like magic. It was really quite spooky. But thankfully, this right here, the setting lever spring, is going to hold everything down. So I'm just going to put some grease on the obvious parts of that, which engage with things and put pressure on things. A little bit too much grease, but I did actually go in and dab some of it with Rodico. You can see there's annoyingly a little hair on the end of the stem, which is fantastic. So that can now get pushed all the way in, and we can check the function of it all, which, as you can see, is brilliant. So now let's carry on. We are so close. So that's me showing the hacking. Look, so it stops the balance wheel spinning, which shows that that's all engaged. So now we can start reassembling the calendar jumper wheel, if that's what that's even called. I'm going to just guess that it is. So there's that spring, which stops it from jumping and advancing the date both ways, just to protect everything from breaking. And then there's a cover that goes over that. Now, this small little wheel that goes in here is made of plastic, and I didn't set that down properly, and it got chewed up. So I took that one out. I took another one out of a 6119, which has the same one, except it was actually made out of metal that time round, which apparently is better. But I'm annoyed that I did that, because that part being plastic is plastic for a reason, to stop things from kind of breaking. But yeah, basically I didn't set that down right, and I damaged it. So that was really annoying. But maybe learn from me and just make sure that it's engaged properly. So then we can put the calendar spring in, put some more grease on that, and I got that all over the place. So I dabbed that with some Rodico. I'm going to put a little bit of lubrication on the edge, which is going to butt up against the date wheel, which was some 9010, I think, the lubrication that I used for that one. And then the date wheel can go down after giving it a little dab with some Rodico. And once you pull that spring back, it sets it down, and then we can put this plate on, which holds everything down for the final time. But yeah, at this point, that little plastic wheel was not on properly, and I didn't realize that until I set the dial down and went to set the the time on the watch, and I realized that the date just wasn't advancing at midnight, and it was because of that. It was because that wasn't sat down properly, and then it was all chewed up. So I had to replace that. So this is the chapter ring going back in, and this is then the crystal gasket going on. Now these are all new. That cost £30, that set of gaskets. So there was the crystal one, and then the caseback one, and the bezel one, and then a crown one, which I'm not going to be doing in this video. And then this is a new crystal. I used a new old stock crystal. A new crystal did come in the kit that cost me 30 quid, but I didn't end up using that one because I had a new old stock one, which cost me 80. So I was a bit pretentious, and I just ended up buying a new old stock crystal. But they are literally identical. When I saw them next to each other, I was a bit like, I don't know, I could have just used the aftermarket one. So now I'm going to push this retaining ring down, which sort of locks everything into place, puts a bit of pressure on the crystal down onto the gasket, and creates a seal, and keeps everything from falling out. Now, I'm not going to put the bezel on just yet. So I'm going to leave that till later, but the bezel could go on now. But let's go ahead and assemble the rest of the watch. So this is a little plastic sort of dial spacer ring which sits down. Very fragile. And I was getting a bit confused about the positioning of everything because this crown is actually at the 4 o'clock position, not the 3 o'clock position. So now I can go ahead and set the dial down. So I'm going to tighten up the dial screws. There's dial feet screws, rather. There's 2 feet that stick out of the back of the dial and then 2 screws in the movement, on the side of the movement, and we can screw those down. So these are the hands from before servicing the watch. So this is a shot from earlier, but I just wanted to show you how bad the condition was because I wanted to replace them. So I found this donor movement, this donor watch, which is a 6119. Very similar movement. So this is where I use some of the parts from, like the balance wheel and that calendar spring. But I also use the hands because it's the same hour and minute hands. So it is a little bit sad, obviously, sacrificing another watch for the sake of a better one, dare I say. But it kind of just is the way it goes. You know, you use things to get parts from when they're not available elsewhere. So yeah, I bought that for very cheap. I was very pleased to pick that up. So those are the hands coming off. Now, this was risky, but I wanted to give them a wipe because they were also just covered in little bits of oxidation and tarnishing. So I used a microfiber cloth and so unbelievably gently, I just gave it a little wipe. You know, it was so gentle. There was very, very little pressure at all. And I didn't go overboard. I left them still with a little bit of oxidation on them, but I just didn't want to rub too hard. So yeah, once I was happy with those, we can set the time to midnight. Now look at that. In my middle finger, I'm not using a finger cot. The hour hand is going on, but I'm not using a finger cot. And look at that mark just evaporate. Oh my goodness, that was so unbelievably amateur and embarrassing. Luckily, not a mark in sight, and I gave it a wipe with some Rodico, but I gave it a dab very gently with some Rodico, but that is a massively noob thing to do. Terrible, terrible practice. So now I can remove the crown and stem and set the case down. And this is where it just all really starts to get unbelievably exciting. So there's some HP 1300, which goes on to the post. Again, this was a combination of 9010 and HP 1300 here. And then we can set down this, which I think is called like a reduction wheel, which engages with the mainspring. So that's the final sort of point of contact for winding up the mainspring with the rotor that spins around. And then there's a cover plate that goes on that. Now I used some lubrication on the teeth on that reduction wheel because they're going to be kind of engaging with the paw lever. And yeah, so you just want to be using some lubrication. Final bit of lubrication going on, and then it's time to set down the automatic watch work into the movement. So there it goes. And you can just sort of give the barrel a very light rotate, and you'll see that reduction wheel kind of engage and drop down. There we go, like that. So that's how you know that that is engaged properly. And then we can put the final screws on to the automatic winding work. Oh my goodness me, I can't believe we're nearly here. A little bit of lubrication going on the top of that, and in the bearings for the rotor. And then, speaking of which, it's time for that rotor to go on, which is kind of keyed with some parallel lines there in the rotor, which engage with that, the center of that bearing. This is the final gasket going on for the case back. Mine arrived a little bit squashed, but put some lubrication on it, and it did sit down into place. It's a little bit like smaller. I think that's just to kind of keep it in there, but maybe it was slightly the wrong size. And then the case back can be screwed down. Massive hair in the way. Luckily, that doesn't go anywhere near the inside. So we'll temporarily just tighten the back up with the case ball, but that needs to be tightened up properly. But there we have it. Look at that. That looks absolutely glorious. It's night and day from when we started. It's clean, it's serviced, it's got the replacement parts in it, and it just looks... Oh man, I mean, it just needs to go on my wrist forever. It looks absolutely unreal, and I'm so proud of myself. However, there is a few issues. Let's talk about them. So this is the timographer result after I had just finished servicing the movement. I hadn't assembled the sort of calendar dial side, the calendar works of the watch yet. So this is all just the backside stuff. And as you can see, not bad. Amplitude of 206, kind of low, not horrible. The rate and the beat error can be adjusted, but the lines, the straightness of those lines look good. This is the footage that you saw, and this is about 20 minutes later after that picture. That picture was the first sort of moment that it was all back together, and I sent that to Mike from My Retro Watches, who's obviously been helping me. The amplitude's dropped, the rate and the beat error can be adjusted, but the worst part is the lines have started going all over the place. Now, if we put the watch in the timographer, this is after it's being cased up and everything's being put back together. Let's see how it looks on here now. It's absolutely horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Like, what on earth has happened? The amplitude has dropped. It's plummeted. It's basically snowstorming again. I mean, there's one kind of straight line going through there, but whatever's happening on the other side, once that pallet fork hits on the other side, it's just an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess. And I was just so disheartened at this point. I'd put the watch back together. It looked beautiful. I was absolutely devastated. I got straight on the phone to Mike from My Retro Watches, and he said, look, Elliot, you can either go back in here and you can tackle this again, and you can rack your brains trying to work out what it is. And he thought that I should, but he also gave me the option to send it to him and he would take a look. I'd kind of lost a little bit of confidence here. I'd serviced the watch and I was so proud of myself. And to go back in again with all of the things that can go wrong, damaging things like the dial and the hands, I just didn't want to do it again. So I have sent it to Mike from My Retro Watches. He is making a video. By the time this video has gone out, it will be live. So that will be in the description. Go and check out part 2 of this story. Mike is going to be making a video and it's going to be absolutely brilliant, and he is going to show you what I did wrong. He's going to show you how to fix it, and then he's going to do some other things to it that I would be way too inexperienced to do. So massive thank you to Mike from My Retro Watches. Go and check out that video right now. I hope you have all enjoyed. This isn't over. I'm going to be getting another watch and I'm going to be servicing it, and I'm going to do an even better job. But I hope you've enjoyed my very first experience servicing a watch. I will catch you all in the next one. Goodbye.